It's 15:06 GMT. This is Focus on Africa from the BBC World Service. I'm Audrey Brown. African activists and policymakers have been meeting in Gabon this week to discuss solutions to the problems wrought by climate change. They were also there to create a springboard for regional implementation of the Watershed 2015 Paris Agreement resolutions. The idea is to take solutions and suggestions to COP27, which will be held in Egypt. So what's been decided? Dr. Richard Munang is the Deputy Director of the UN Environment Programme for Africa, and he began by laying out the scale of the problems.
If you look at the Paris Agreement 2015, 2022, we're talking 7 years, and the challenges that have actually before Africa have continued. Over 257 million citizens still go to bed hungry today. Floods and droughts are rampant. 22 million citizens afflicted by droughts in the eastern part of Africa. So what the Africa Climate Week set out to do was operationalize Section 5 of the Paris Agreement, which is to bring state and non-state actors to showcase how it can be done and how they have been doing it and to identify the gap so that moving to COP27, which is actually Christian, the African COP, we can be able to know what already works in the continent by good state and non-state actors and at the same time the gaps.
So you say you've given us numbers that are shocking. I have no doubt that those numbers could possibly increase given that the crises seem to be escalating. But tell us, what was the most important part of the 2015 agreement and was it implemented or not?
The most important part of the 2015 agreement was to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees. The latest assessments, starting off with the UNEP emissions gap report, which shows that if the world was to put together what is called nationally determined contribution, which are very simple climate action plans that countries have put together and submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, if they were to implement all those that they put together, the world will still go up to 3.7 degrees. That is going to be catastrophic for Africa because what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change did show in their latest report was that the world is already warming at 1.1 degrees as we speak, and Africa is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world.
So in other words, you're saying that crucial commitment is not being met? And is there any sign of it going to be met in the near future?
The reality is this. If you look at the changing climate, we are all losers if we go above 1.5 degrees. If you look at the flood and drought, they're not only happening in Africa, they're happening across the entire world. And what it means is the world can actually be able to curtail and make sure that we don't go above 1.5 degrees. But that doesn't mean that there are no efforts. Africa is a negligible emitter. Now, let me just stress this point. Africa is a negligible emitter, emitting only 4% with a continent with a population of 1.4 billion people. And having 17% of the entire global population, have more people who go to bed hungry than anywhere in the world, have more people who are energy impoverished than anywhere in the world, have more young people than anywhere in the world who get into the labor market, 12 million of them every year, without jobs. What does this mean? Gabon, where the Africa Climate Week happened, is the first country on earth to have become carbon positive. What does it mean? Gabon sinks, and the way they protected their forests and the processes they've taken and put in place absorb over 1 billion tons of carbon. And that then means if every country is to use those approaches to ensure that at least you can protect your ecosystem, but at the same time, use the services, which are assets from these ecosystems, to inject into adaptation, we can move forward.
So tell us about the other mitigating factors and the bold moves that other African countries are making in order to mitigate climate change.
So many of them. If you look at the continent of Africa today, the first is Africa is actually engaged in actions that are not emitting. If you look at the practices that happens, especially with energy, they are not actually using heavy energy processes to add value. Africa actually still deal with raw products. That then means that their contribution to emissions is quite very low. If you look at the carbon sinks in the world, the biggest carbon sink is Africa forest, which actually is in the Central African region. And at the same time, what countries have actually done in their nationally determined contribution, which they are revising, they have put in place clean energy solutions, and most of them are actually giving tax incentives to be able to move towards clean energy like renewable energy, wind, hydro. Those are actions that are already happening in countries.
That's Dr. Richard Munang, Deputy Director of the United Nations Environment Programme for Africa.